Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria. This is the place where we're going to talk about the strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And it is my absolute pleasure to host today Michael. Michael, I'm not going to even try with the last name. So I'll let you introduce yourself with the full name. I told you that's going to be an achievement for me one day when I can spell and pronounce your last name. So go for it. Tell us.
I am Michael Tetreault. I'm the editor of Concierge Medicine Today. We are the Concierge Medicine healthcare trade publication for the space in healthcare called Concierge Medicine. So it's Tetreault. It's French and Canadian all at the same time.
Yes, you guys should see how it is spelled. I don't know why I'm having such difficulty with it, but it's always a good conversation for fun, right, Michael?
Absolutely. There's I find a lot of similarity between my last name and a lot of the hockey jerseys. So
there we go. All right, Michael, let's start. 3 words that describe you and give us a little bit of a sentence or two behind each one of them.
Wow, that's a good question. I would say cautious. That's something I think was built that way and was raised that way. I would say grateful. I'm very grateful for what I have, very grateful for my family, for my 3 kids, and just very appreciative of that. And I would say probably I'll say 2 words. I'm just 4 doctors. I really value the physicians in my life and my family's life. And I understand that 5 words from them carry a lot of weight. And so that's kind of what I've dedicated my existence to in my professional life is, really helping to build up the character and the leadership of doctors in their communities.
And if I have to add one more word for you, Michael, that will be organized, because I have no idea how you stay on top of everything that you stay and respond to emails and send newsletters. And I'm like, wow. So congratulations for that. That's definitely a skill.
Thank you. And I'm glad to be able to be here and talk with you as well. You've contributed so much to the concierge medicine community and in our conferences and podcasts and so on. And I was watching TikTok, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about some of the things in culture today, but I was watching TikTok, sent it to my wife just yesterday. And I think I really related with high performing anxiety in not a negative, and I took it as a negative thing. But and part of that is staying exceptionally organized and maybe to a point where it's a little OCD.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. Michael, before we talk, I'm so excited that you're here and I'm so grateful that you said yes, because as you know, I'm very passionate about concierge medicine, the practice of boutique well-being, wellness, because I firmly believe that's the direction that we're going into. But before we dive into that conversation, tell people who have no idea what concierge medicine is. What is concierge medicine?
Sure. So concierge medicine is a version of a relationship between a physician and a patient, or the practice and that physician and the patient in a subscription delivery method way. It's a business model, not a specialty. So most concierge doctors are primary care, family medicine, but I would say that probably represents 65-70% of physicians out there in those specialties. But we've really started to see in the last 10 years or so a lot of specialists that have a relationship built with their patients also incorporate a subscription into the relationship. And those subscriptions are not covered. They're not for services that are covered by Medicare or insurance. They're for services outside of the parameters of those types of insurance and Medicare relationships. So it's kind of like the easiest way to describe it is it's kind of like Amazon Prime, but for healthcare. You can get, I can get toilet paper and books and watch movies all at the same time with one annual fee. And sometimes, unlike Amazon, that sometimes that fee ranges, in price point. Maybe it's $100, maybe it is, $300-400. It just really depends on your community, where you live, and what type of specialty and doctor really, what what kind of an expertise and relationship do you expect from that doctor? Because maybe you're a pretty high needs patient, or maybe you're like, yeah, I only go see my doctor once a quarter and we just need to text after this.
Yeah. I'm really curious, and I have not looked at the stats. What are the growth rates like for concierge medicine today? Do you have that off the top of your head?
Sure. So it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly on that, as well as the firm numbers, because this is a business model, not a specialty. So there's no federal database on this that's tracking these types of things. We certainly here at Concierge Medicine Today try to keep a good handle on those. And I would say that it's probably growing at a incremental single digit rate of, and maybe anywhere between 3 and 6% is what we hear from leaders in the industry that kind of report back to us when we ask the same question. So I'd say that it is on the upward movement. It's not for everybody. It's not for every patient. And so I think that to make a generalization that, concierge medicine is for everybody, or a version of it, it could be for everybody. Look, I'm different than you, and you're different than me, and we're different than the people outside the four walls of our offices right now. And I'm also probably the last Canadian on the planet to think that a thing like concierge medicine is a good thing. I think that there's a lot of benefit to concierge medicine, but I also think that there's a lot of benefit to the healthcare that I see my family get up in Canada and across the globe too.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I was having a conversation just this week with somebody who is actually a physician who is transitioning from regular medical office to concierge. And I was shocked because he has 4,000 patients in a non-concierge model, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, how can you know the health history, the health implications of 4,000 people? As a patient, we get frustrated when we go to the doctor's office. We have to wait, we don't get the results as fast as we want. But if you look on the flip side of the volume that these doctors have to handle, and I'm privileged to work with some amazing doctors also as clients, and see the intensity of their work schedule and the stress that those people are under. Where is the balance? And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that from what you see.
Sure. So a couple of things on that. Related to the 4,000 patients, I think that's probably, those are numbers I've heard before. I've heard and continue to hear that are under a large patient panel of any physician. And certainly any physician that gets up every single morning has an impossible job. I mean, I think about it, somebody said back when I was in college, look, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. There's nothing special about some celebrity or some person who's got way more to 15 degrees and than who you are, whatever your profession might be. And but at the same time, the weight that a physician carries emotionally, psychologically, it's just really puts a lot of stress on them. It puts a lot of stress on the communities that they try to provide care in. And, I think that a lot of blame is given to bureaucracy and administrative headaches and paperwork. And if we could just focus on the patient, that's why solutions happen. That's why we saw the advent of computers, and we saw the advent of things needed to be disrupted, things needed to be invented, things needed to be retweaked. And that's what happens. And that's what's happening in healthcare, is that the business models for doctors have been tweaked and disrupted a little bit. And that's okay, because I think what we need when we look at patients from the other side of the exam room, I always say I'm not a physician, but I am a patient. So I know what it's like to sit on the other side of the exam room from you, is that, I don't want just someone across the exam room from me to just fix my problem. I also want you to listen to me. And I was talking with one doctor the other day, and we mentioned this just a few minutes ago off air, is, she's a concierge doctor in the West Coast. And she says, Michael, you have no idea how much of the patient physician dialogue and the time that I spend just talking with my patients about their marriages and nothing really to do. I mean, yeah, we'll cover the ailments that they're in here for today, or we'll cover their chronic stuff, and we'll talk about all that stuff. But man, we talk a lot about their marriages, and she's like, it's like we're marriage counselors. And we went into internal medicine or family medicine or pediatrics, whatever it might be. So, there's definitely a time, there's something that needed to be disrupted. And that's why concierge medicine existed. I think that when you look at numbers, it can seem daunting, like, well, what am I going to do with, 4,000 patients? Well, that's probably, if that doctor's been in practice for, let's say, 20 years, and he looks at all of the files, that's probably an accurate number of how many people have walked through his door over that given time frame. But a more accurate assessment to think about it and put more granular numbers is, maybe how many patients have walked in your door within the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and that number drops from 4,000 to say maybe 2,000 or 2,500, or maybe it is 4,000. Maybe it's
still a lot,
right? It's still a lot. And I remember sitting at a seminar, listening to a couple of doctors a few years ago explain what this model was to their patients. And I remember a older lady, a more seasoned lady, she raised her hand. She's like, I just don't get it, because you're saying you're going to go to 500 patients from 5,000. How are you still going to have time for me? And, to me, because I understand it, from this side of the exam room, she's a newbie to the exam room and saying, 500 is still a lot. Like, how are you going to make time? How are you going to call all of us back? And she's like, well, I'm not going to be talking to all of you at the same time. Like, I'm going to be able to stagger schedules, and I'm still going to be working 12, 18 hours a day. I'm just going to enjoy my day a whole lot more. And I'll be able to research advanced treatments and different things on your behalf. I remember that was something the concierge doctor that recently passed away. I remember her saying that across a coffee table to me. It was a little circle table, one of those little 2-foot Starbucks tables. And she said, Michael, I was still work 18 hours a day. I just enjoy my day because I still work really hard for my patients. So moving into concierge medicine is not one of those things that doctors do lightly. And it's not something that they do because it's about the money. And that's a whole other topic that I've had on our podcasts and in our events and things. Is there's nothing wrong with a physician earning a wage and earning a living at all. And I don't think that any physician needs to sit there and wear making no money like it's a badge of honor. I think that that's wrong too. Why? Because I'm sitting on the other side of the exam room from you as my physician. 5 words from you carry weight. 5 words from you can demolish my life. 5 words from you can build me up. And it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world.
And I think that's so important that you mentioned that, because as you know, I'm passionate about changing the messaging that's happening in the wellness industry. And I always say that it's two-sided, right? The wellness industry needs to change for providers as well. So if you're somebody such as a doctor or somebody who, teaches mindfulness and movement like me, why do people think that you should work 20 hours a day and kill yourself working to take care of somebody else's health? There has to be balance for the doctors as well. When a doctor is burned out, that does not serve us well, right? When whoever is providing your wellness services is burned out, that does not serve us well. So it is equally important to take care of our physicians as well, because they are humans too, and they also need to sleep well, eat well, take care of themselves, right? Rather than be stressed. And those are people who deal with high stress situations. They're dealing with people's lives, right? That's important. And then the other thing that I'm really happy that you brought up is the balance, right? I joke sometimes that I'm like people's hairdresser, right? I know the stories, I know what's going on in their families. And I think that's what builds our relationships and also builds that trust factor, right? Because from what I see it, your body reflects the state of your life, whether it's your personal life, professional life. So people, I think, share that because it impacts their health. If you're really stressed, in the example that you gave, because of your marriage, you might see your blood pressure go up, right? So it's important to have those conversations. And when somebody is a concierge medicine doctor and they have the luxury of giving you their time, right? It's not that doctors don't want to give you their time. They don't give you their time because they don't have extra time to spare, because there are 5 other people waiting behind you, right?
Yeah. Well, and the unfortunate part is they, for better or worse, they went into a profession that they carry that degree with them their entire life. And yes, they can move jobs, but it's just kind of moving from one bad job to the next. I hope this is a better bad job. Like, it's not necessarily always going to be great. And there's parts of your job I'm sure you don't like, and parts of my job that I don't like. And that's just life. I mean, we teach our kids, look, life is not fair. And if you're that's a whole other thing about fairness in healthcare. And again, I'm speaking as a Canadian that's also like a recovering Canadian, but I'm also, hey, I love some of the Canadian things too. So we've had to change. We had to disrupt the model. My daughter just recently wanted to watch this new movie, and I'm not promoting it by any means, but I thought one of the actors said something in it that was very profound, and I wish I could repeat it with clarity that they did. But it was The Glass Onion. I'm sure it's like the sequel to Knives Out. And he was describing what a disruptor is. And because it was this older gentleman, he's like, so what is that? Because is that some social media, YouTube, TikTok thing? And he's like, no, here's what a disruptor really means. And I thought that definition that actor gave, was very profound about they've identified something that was broken currently in our culture. And they just said, you know what? If we disrupt it too much, it's not going to be helpful. But if we disrupt it just a little, people will recognize it, and they'll recognize that it needed to be changed. It needed to be tweaked a little bit. And that's what concierge medicine does for some doctors. It's not for every doctor by any means. But for me as a patient, it is all about relationship. And we're also trying to improve customer service and hospitality, because nothing is as sweet to a person's name when we walk into a business as our first having them know us. Like they smile at us, and we just don't get that in today's healthcare environments. And I push this boulder up a mountain about hospitality and healthcare and good customer service every single day. And it's exhausting, because you would believe that people would be on board with that. But, healthcare, it's a tough animal to change. And we all talk at conferences about how big and rapid and disruptive that it really is, and how fast it's moving. But, that's great on Friday afternoon. But come Tuesday morning, when the salesman calls and the saleswoman calls and says, let's put this into your practice. Let's put these good ideas into your practice. Whoa, that's not how we do things here. We're going to keep status quo. We're going to keep doing it like we've always done it. And, that's why we keep pushing this boulder up a mountain, because I want healthcare of the future to be better for your kids and my kids, so that they can find a doctor that they know, like, and trust. And to get back, I'm sorry to go on a rant, but one of the things I thought was interesting, according to patient surveys who are people actively looking for a new doctor, they said, we asked the question, if your doctor's office closed tomorrow, how much or how little would you actually care? 8 out of every 10 people who are actively looking for a new doctor said, wouldn't care. Didn't matter anyway. I didn't have a relationship with them. They didn't know me. I didn't like them, know them. And I probably, if it comes down to it, I probably didn't even really trust them, because they spent less than 15 minutes with me. So we got to do something.
And that's such a great point, because I was having a conversation with my daughter, and she has a teacher who is challenging her. So my daughter is not thrilled about that teacher, because the teacher is making her work. And I said, what you need to understand is that the people who challenge you, they're the ones who are making you grow. And what you also have to understand is that if you go into a field like teaching, you're likely going to teaching because you love teaching. It's not because it's a glamorous job. It's not because you're going to make tons of money. You're passionate about it. And I think the same applies for doctors, right? Who wants to go through gruesome medical school residency, all of those years, all of these expenses, if they're not really passionate about it? And how sad it is to hear that patients wouldn't care to replace you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what is the message that sends to the doctor? And yeah, you're right. This sends a message that things have to change. And I think people are starting to become aware of that. And to the point on disruption, what I tell my clients is I have to approach each client differently because they're in a different state of mindset of their life. And if I tell them all to do the same thing, they will not be my clients. But what I have to do is just make them just a little bit curious and aware to where they're like, she's right, this doesn't work for me. So how do we take the next step? And then the next step and the next step and the next step. And I think that's what disruption is, right? You can't just massively change something like healthcare, because a big piece of shifting the wellness mindset, I do think, is shifting exactly the mindset of providers and consumers alike.
And I do think that the word wellness, unfortunately, it has been kind of hijacked by a lot of different healthcare providers over the last few decades. So when we think about wellness from I speak from a patient perspective. I think it's kind of like, have a nice day. It's a very general platitude that doesn't have a lot of weight and meaning. We talked about this off air. Is look, when we're teaching here at Concierge Medicine Today, we teach doctors, empathy, but we teach it. We don't just say it. Like we practice it, and we write, thousands of thank you notes a year to doctors that we do know and don't know, and send them gift cards and different things. We practice that empathy to say, look, we can talk all day about empathy, and I'll never mention the word empathy at all. Just like we could talk about wellness all day and never talk about or say the actual word wellness. I think that's how you know that you've got an audience that leans into you and says, hey, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because it really is impacting. And so, wellness is unfortunately one of those words that, as a patient, I just kind of wince and be like, yeah, wellness plan, wellness provider, like, it's just not working for me anymore as a patient.
And that in itself, to me, is a sign that things have to change. We should be excited about our wellness, our well-being, like you said, all overused words, because what's the meaning behind them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's a similar word in that vein was, I read an article maybe a month or two ago. It said physicians are burned out on talking and hearing about physician burnout. Great. I can't wait to see what the next iteration of the name or how they're going to rebrand physician wellness. I think it's been titled moral injury, because they don't want to talk about it anymore. And I think that what patients want from their providers, from their wellness providers, from their doctors, sitting on the other side of the exam room as a patient myself and for my kids, is I want somebody that I know, like, and trust. And if I don't know you, like you, or trust you, you better believe I'm voting with my feet and I'm not coming back, because I can tell, just because you're on my insurance plan, or just because I've, walked in the door, doesn't mean I'm going to come back. Like I can tell whether or not you're going to work for me within seconds. And that might not seem very fair, but I think that we need to drop the fairness argument in a lot of conversations and say, you know what, forget about fair, because you can't be fair. I'm Canadian of all things. And I keep referencing that because I think that we have tried fair in healthcare up there, and we've learned that it works in some situations and environments, and it doesn't work in some situations and environments. But what we're seeing, particularly in subscription-based healthcare delivery, and even in your field, is forget fair and tweak things and get engaged. That's what people on the other side of the exam room really want, is forget about fairness and just get engaged. Like what you're saying, you got to tweak it, because what you say for everybody isn't going to apply to everybody.
Yeah, you have to relate to the people you're talking to. And I would think, I'm not a physician, but I think my motto is very much concierge approach to wellness and lifestyle. because it's adapted to your needs. It's supporting you where you are. And it's about creating a relationship with my clients so that, when they want to quit, I have to be like, you committed to this, right? Why are you not showing up in class? Where are you? And, you have to have the time and space and energy, which I hate to bring the word of physician burnout, but if they're burnout, they don't have energy to give. They don't have that energy. If their cup is empty, you can't give from an empty cup.
We can't give up. I mean, we can't give up so easily. And that's where what you talk about and do each day is so helpful to not just your clients and your patients and the doctors that you work with. And I know you're working with concierge doctors as well, and helping them inspire their patients by inspiring them and giving them, not things that are platitudes, but saying, look, it took you 5 years to gain the 50 pounds, but you're giving up after 10 days. Well, you're only going to give your 5 years of gaining 50 pounds, 10 days. Like, come on, that doesn't make any sense. And I totally get the frustration that so many who work in healthcare, whether you're a nurse or a PA or doing what you do, or a physician, is, look, you wake up and you're like, I'm going to deal with the same problems. Oh, this patient is coming in. This person is coming in. I've been telling this person to do the right things, and they just never do. And in fact, they're going to come in today and they're going to be worse than they were a month ago. And that is so deflating. I mean, as deflating as that is, my interpretation of what I do is, look, try and talk to doctors about, their staff, and they just shake their head and be like, that is, I've got some troublesome patients, but boy, my staff take the cake, and they're my biggest headache. And that's tough to deal with and wake up and deal with every single day. You feel like you're walking into a penalty box every Monday morning.
And that does not feel good, because I will tell you that, and that was interesting, the last conference that you had, it was one of your speakers. He said, raise your hands if you have patients that you do not like. And everybody raised their hands. And I was like, and he goes, she's doing something right. And I think I've shared this with you, Michael, is that people who don't show up and don't do the work, I let them go. And I tell them, I am not the right fit for you. I can't help you, because you as a client or as a patient, you have to take personal responsibility, right? If the doctor tells you, you have to change your diet, you have to do this, gives you resources, but you don't do anything, that is not upon your physician. That is upon you. And that, I think, it's a big shift in how we have to own our own, now I don't want to say wellness, well-being, right? Our own health, right? Regardless whether you go to a concierge doctor or not, you have to have an active part. I have people who come and say, well, I did physical therapy and they didn't help me. Well, did you do the exercises they gave you? Well, no, they were too simple. The PT can't do the exercises for you. They can only tell you the exercises that you need, right?
Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about travel. And I was like, so what are you going to do now that you're retired? Are you going to go travel? And, Patagonia, I know you guys hiked, all these different places over the world, and you did these, really cool things. He's like, I can watch that stuff on YouTube. He's like, and I feel like I've been there if I'm on a really nice TV, he's like, dude, come on. Like, that's, it brought to mind that, but, we have these devices, and there's so much data out there now supporting, like, we have to have social interaction. We have to have face-to-face dinners. Like, it's good to get out there and be social. And it's not selfish as a dad or a mom, to leave our kids at home safely, and get a babysitter, or have your spouse watch over your kids, of course. And, you don't need to feel guilty or by being selfish. Like, I'm going out with the girls tonight, or I'm going out with, the guys tonight for dinner. That's okay. We have got to do some of those things, because but then there's the other side of, well, I'm connected to 53 people today. Like, you don't even know how many people texted me, and companies texted me. Like, I'm engaged with people all the time. This stuff, we have access as patients to so much more stuff. I wish in a in a perfect world, I wish the physician community in of some kind of way would just take over TikTok and just let TikTok be this full of medical information. I would love that as a patient because there's a lot of garbage and trash on there for sure. But if it was targeted correctly, it would be like, wow, there's so much good information out there that physicians are already actively sharing, on these devices. But then we are left up to our own, you know, devices and our own head voices in our own heads to be like, well, how do I make sense of all of this 53 different pieces of advice about 4 topics that I've heard
And
today? And
think
that's where
about
a doctor comes in.
think about all the apps that we have. Like 20 years ago, we had no cell phones, no apps. Now you have the health apps, count your calories, do this exercise, do this. And what's happening to our community? It's not becoming healthier, right? We're still looking for that instant gratification. We're still looking for that shortcut, the example you gave. It took you 20 years to gain these pounds, but you've exercised a week and you're frustrated. It doesn't work like that. It's a lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
And you have to meet your physician somewhere. And I also think, the drawback of all of that information is sometimes there is too much information. So do you do this diet or that diet or that diet? Well, how about you just use common sense and moderate diet, right? Like, we don't need to go to extreme. I've been in the fitness industry for, I'll date myself, but 30 years. There are all of these new workouts, new fads. They're exactly the same thing. The principles of fitness are not going to change. You have to exercise. You have to move. It's as basic as that, right?
I
You don't need.
remember sitting next to a good college friend, and he's a PA in Washington D.C. area, and I used to just roll my eye. He and I remember crystal clear. He ordered salad and fish, and I sit there and ordered like, a really juicy hamburger, and I was like, dude, this looks so good. I'm so glad we're doing this, And then he's like, I was like, how can you eat that? Brussels sprouts, like, oh, like, I mean, I'll eat those things, but not by choice. And he's like, well, it's a lifestyle. And I just rolled my eyes. But then I got to an age, I turned 40 and then 45 and incrementally moving up in my age. And, when my doctor who I knew, like, and trust, when he said, look, if you don't do something about your numbers, you're going to, this is where you're headed. And in fact, you're probably going to be headed there in a year or two if you don't do something about your numbers now. So I did, I talked with my wife and I talked with him and I kept him informed to be like, hey, I'm doing this. And it was like little things. I just texted him once a month or a couple times. And I was like, what do you think of this? What do I kept him informed and he kept me grounded and guided. It wasn't every day, but I got infiltrated with all this information from all these different apps and devices. And, I don't think common sense is enough anymore because common sense is overridden by the next pop-up, the next notification. And common sense has got to be kind of overridden, unfortunately, for some by a licensed qualified physician who says, that's good advice. However, for you, it's like bringing in a stack of papers from the internet and then saying, I'm so excited about our visit today, doc. But I have 53 pages I want you to read over before I leave in the next 10 minutes. It's not going to happen. So having a grounded relationship with a physician is something new to our culture. It is something new to our pocketbook. And, a lot of people will disagree with that. But at the end of the day, 5 words from my doctor carry a lot of weight with me, so much so that I changed my lifestyle.
And you know what? You're right. It starts with small incremental changes. And when your physician could be a player who assists you into growing and into changing your lifestyle doesn't change overnight, right? You don't go from burgers to Brussels sprouts, but you slowly one evening have Brussels sprouts, the next day you have salad, right? It's small changes day by day.
Yeah. And I've lost myself. I mean, he texted me a month ago and he's like, your numbers are amazing. I don't even know what happened. I mean, he does know what happened, but it was metaphor, and so, yeah, I mean, now I just approach eating and exercise in a different way. I'm not perfect by any means, but, I have a long ways to go, but I'm grateful for the guidance that relationship with
Yeah,
my physician had. And my wife was probably even more so part of that.
I love it. Michael, let's finish. Tell us your definition of rebellious.
That's a good question.
I had to ask you.
I would say an example would be the next time you walk into a doctor's office or a healthcare facility or practice, that it is really hard to be kind to those people because they don't deserve it sometimes. And I think that if we want to change something and be rebellious, I think that a good example of that would be from our side of the exam room. We've got to start treating our healthcare facility workers, our doctors, our nurses, our PAs, and even those staff who are in admin. We got to kill them with kindness. And really, it can be really tough because they're not the nicest people all the time. But I think that's what we've got to do. And we never know if our smile might change their day, or something kind of
I always say that you can change your attitude and change somebody else's day, right? The way you react to the long wait, or if you show them some kindness in the tonality that you ask, how much more you have to wait, that can make a big difference.
Yeah, I was at All Pro Dad's program this morning, and that was one of their focuses was kindness. And they had a video from like one of those morning shows, and it was this old senior, and he had lost his wife of like 50 something years, and he was kind of left and depressed and alone. And one day he's shopping for groceries, and being the grumpy person that he was, he's just pushing the cart, and this 4-year-old and her mom reached out, and she said, "It's my birthday. Can I get a hug?" This 4-year-old, and the mom said, "Okay," and he's like, "Look, I have grandkids, but they're all old and gone." And, that one act of kindness changed this old man's life. And I think that we've got to start doing more to the people who don't deserve it. And that can be really tough. It can. I struggle with that too, because we all walk into healthcare facilities and centers, and those are not known for being great customer experiences. So,
but you know what? I think it's important to remember that we have human beings sitting across from us who, are overwhelmed, dealing with a lot, tough schedules, stress, dealing with people's health, and it's okay to give them grace. That's what
that's a good one. Yeah.
All right, Michael, to end, how can people find you?
You can go to our healthcare trade publication, conciergemedicinetoday.com. And we have podcasts learning about this industry. And we also have an annual conference. If you're interested in coming to that, go to conciergemedicinetoday.com as well. And you can learn more about this great industry and these amazing doctors and people that are working in this industry.
I'll just say awesome conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your time today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Make it a rebellious day. Stay rebellious, and I'll see you next time. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your friends.